Hi, Federico. Welcome to the Hell Universe podcast.
Hi, Eva. Hi, Kylie. I'm so happy to be here with you guys.
Yeah,
Yay!
thanks for coming.
I am so excited for you to be here. I've been really looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. And I actually have to say, the minute I met you, not the minute, but very early on in our meditation program together, I was like, oh, I'm going to want this person on the podcast. Like I already knew, because you and I are the most talkative people in our cohort, don't you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't have a podcast, but if I had one, I would have wanted to invite you as well. I always felt that we had, so much to talk about and was kind of looking forward to this opportunity. So I'm happy that we're doing this.
Yay. All right. So our first question is, what's life teaching you right now? What's something that you feel like you're learning?
So it's actually something that you and I talked about in our meditation teacher training. And it's encapsulated in the sentence that you shared. What is in the way is the way. Um, I felt like I needed time to work on certain things, and I felt like I wanted space kind of in the last few weeks. And then there's been some difficulties back home in Italy with my mom, and I ended up having to travel there and kind of having to face a lot of old traumas and so on. And I initially was resisting it, thinking, this is going to get in the way of me kind of working on the things that I think are a priority, that are going to help me prepare the practicum, the project that we're working on as part of our training, kind of the intro to mindfulness course and so on. And it ended up being actually one of the most profound lessons in the power of mindfulness that I could ever get, because now that I'm aware of the trauma response that I have when I go back to Italy, I can make an effort to ground myself, come back, and step out of the trauma reaction, see that there's a bigger, broader reality, and kind of try to live from that, try to choose a different way to respond to what's there. And it's taught me so much. Boundaries is one of the things that I've learned. And the other is, yes, to embrace whatever life throws at you. There's always an opportunity to grow. And this is kind of a recurring theme in my life. Yeah, it's returning these last few weeks as well.
Yeah, honestly, I think I might have needed to hear that, because I'm currently in Taiwan and I'm about to step out of quarantine to be with my family. And to be fully honest, my parents don't listen to this podcast, so I can say this, but I feel like I'm going to enjoy this time in quarantine, maybe a little bit more than dealing with like some family stuff that's going to come up and some triggers that are going to come up. And so being able to use that actually as an opportunity to like really embody and like have my mind kind of be open to what might actually be possible, rather than me kind of worrying about like, oh, it's going to be hard or not uncomfortable. But there's like a possibility. I don't know. That's the fun thing. It's like possibility is so open. I don't know what the possibility is. Anything could happen. And it's usually some kind of internal shift. But I think I needed that reminder.
This is funny because I'm recording this podcast from my brother's childhood bedroom. Like I like that we're all, there's some initial, some family home thing happening. But one of the things I heard in what you were sharing, Federico, is like the softening of compassion. You talked about the trauma response and understanding that you have that's going to show up for you. What I felt was you speaking to this softening that happens when we're compassionate with ourselves. Yeah, I mean, I feel that's the medicine we come back to again and again and again and again.
Yeah. And I just have to also add, I think what you're saying, which is so important. I mean, my ego loves being quoted, but the idea of like what's in the way is the way. I mean, how often do we have a problem in our life and we're like, oh, this is just getting in the way of my like goal or my job, or, you know, our kids are just getting in the way of me being productive in this way, or whatever the story might be. And the thing that I've often noticed is like, oh my God, like actually when I deal with that quote unquote problem, it is serving me in the thing, in my main goal anyway. You know, they're not separate. And so, yeah, that's something that I feel like, I mean, that's what spirituality is, right? Going with the flow. Like you said, responding to what life is throwing at you.
You know, I was recently interviewed as part of a series of talks done by an organization called Thank You Plant Medicine that does advocacy around psychedelics. And I was featured as one of several stories of transformation that were made possible thanks to psychedelics. And one of the other people that were being interviewed was describing the, you know, incredible trauma that she went through in her life, and the addiction, and, you know, tremendous suffering. And she said, I don't wish that suffering upon anyone, but I wish the transformation that came from it upon everyone. And I feel that is the same way I feel about dystonia, about the, you know, the trouble that I went through with my own health. And, you know, it really was in the way of a life that was very well scripted, and that, you know, I had worked really hard to kind of prepare for. And, you know, I was working at the UN and, you know, in my field, and everything was going according to plan. And I was forced to, you know, look deeper and really create a kind of transformation that brought a lot more coherence to my life than I would otherwise kind of have chosen to have. So this might kind of sound a little bit abstract, but I think you get the gist. Sometimes
we love abstract here on Hello Universe.
Okay, great.
It's our bread and butter.
yeah. So yeah, sometimes we're forced to look deeper, choose differently, and it ends up, if we choose to grow from it rather than resisting it, it ends up being, you know, the stuff that makes us so much more mature and wise and ready for life, really.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, you obviously just referenced a bit of your story, and I wonder if you could take a moment to explain like what dystonia is, and sort of walk us through a little bit of what your journey, you know, there is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with great pleasure. So dystonia really is a shortcut that I use to describe a much more complex problem. Dystonia is really a symptom. It just means uneven muscle tone anywhere in the body. So if you just look this up on WebMD or what have you, you'll read that dystonia is a condition, a neurological condition of unknown cause generally, and that there is no cure, and that it can be managed with injections of neurotoxins that freeze the muscles that are spasming. Now, it turns out that there's a much more profound and accurate way to understand dystonia, and that is as maladaptive neuroplasticity, meaning that the brain learns a dysfunctional pattern because of faulty inputs. So if you take my example, when I was a child, you know, I was born with a little bit of facial asymmetry and some anatomical challenges, you know, at the level of my occlusion, the way my teeth close. And some dentists tried to, you know, fix this. They ended up actually opening up my bite on the left side. And so they never managed to close it back down. And so I grew up with this open bite, and my brain never got the messages that other people get saying, here's the left, here's the right, here's the left, here's the right. And that happens 24/7. And it's not something that someone who doesn't have a neurological disorder has to think about.
Mhm.
But it got to a point where my brain basically forgot the left side and started overusing the right side and spasming really hard on that right side, causing this condition called trigeminal neuralgia, this incredibly sharp pain in the face due to compression of one of the cranial nerves. And so the way it kind of exploded for me was that I went to sleep one night and put my alarm clock, slept through the night. And when the alarm clock rang, I couldn't turn and reach the phone. I couldn't roll over. I couldn't move. I was in so much pain that that simple task was impossible. It took me hours to reach the phone and to call for help. Unfortunately, somebody had keys to my apartment and so on. But really, that was the beginning of a deterioration where, and this was 10 years ago, where I was able to do fewer and fewer things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I managed initially to kind of diminish the pain with yoga, with all kinds of, gentle techniques. But it ended up taking away the ability for me to walk for more than a few meters, to chew most foods. I survived on smoothies and blended soups for years. And, I wasn't able to speak for more than a few minutes at a time. And really, I was spending months and months in bed on some sort of forced retreat, if you will, just kind of contemplating, my thoughts, or watching my own show, as one of our teachers said. And the shift happened when, as you said, Kylie, I was able to soften and bring compassion to what was happening, kind of accepting that this was happening to me, that I had to stop resisting, and I had to start listening.
Interject there, though, because that sounds really scary. So essentially, you have full mobility up until around, can I ask what age?
Yeah, it was, say, around 24. I already had the beginning, the early symptoms, but I had a full life until I was 24.
Yeah. So that's like, what you're used to for 24 years. And then all of a sudden, I mean, like you said, it was over time, but eventually at some point, really things that, we all take for granted, walking, chewing, talking. I mean, I can't even imagine not talking. That was all, really limited. I mean, and take it. Yes. I can't even imagine what that must have felt like. I guess, how did you, I guess for some people, I think that could be, I think you have a choice at that point, I guess, but it can either really break you, or you have to just, as you said, let it shape you, I suppose.
Yeah, you have to choose to grow from it. And the people that I help, I now have a website called Hope for Dystonia, where I help people kind of go through what I was able to do, kind of rewire their nervous systems so that they can get their lives back. The ones that choose to really take matters in their own hands and to, really grow from this are the ones that are able to create a shift. Those who, are stuck in some sort of victim mentality where, it's like, somebody did this to me. Why is this happening to me? Why am I not receiving the support that I want as well? That when you expect somebody else to do things to you, it's very hard to recover. And that goes not just for dystonia, but for a lot of things.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I actually ask a question about that? Because I
Yeah.
think this is so beautiful and also, I think, really complicated in some ways. I think so often when we go through difficult experiences, or even honestly just a shitty day, right? Because it's so relative, we can, we cannot recognize that we're in victim mentality, right? And I think one of the ways that victim mentality can show up for me is this like real resistance to it's almost like I convince myself that I'm trying to power through something, but what I'm actually doing is staying like hooked in and attached to it. And so in that way, it's sneaky and it sticks around for longer. And, because this is something you're so intimately familiar with, I think maybe if you wouldn't mind speaking to like what it looks like to disentangle yourself from that kind of victim mentality when something legitimately shitty is happening, right? And how you can be compassionate and also hold yourself to like owning your existence without kind of falling into despair or that like kind of attempt to overpower that's a little false.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think one of the questions that are the most powerful there is, what story am I building around this? What identity am I building around the illness, around whatever difficulty I'm going through? Is this serving me in any way? Am I using this in any way? And so we might discover, for example, that when we were kids, our parents maybe paid attention to us when we were sick, and then they weren't around otherwise, and that was our way to kind of receive love. And so we end up using the illness to receive that love and attention. And sometimes, and that was really the case for me, we feel insecure, say, about the fact that we're not able to work, or that we're not able to show up for others the way we used to. And we end up creating an identity around the illness that is really meant to beg for some sort of approval from others, around the thing that we're insecure about. And so the way to disentangle ourselves is to really accept that nobody's judging us, most likely, that we can stop defending ourselves, that we can stop kind of clinging to the story, and that we can really look deeply at what is happening within, and trying to be with it with that softer, more compassionate heart. And that's kind of where the transformation starts. But obviously, this is very hard to do when you're in the eye of the storm, right? When you're suffering physically and you feel that there is judgment or demands placed on you, and sometimes there is some of that, but mostly it's our inner critic that is being harsh on us. And yeah, so it's something that maybe it's not available immediately, but it is a process that really unlocks healing, letting go of the story.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say it's okay for a while to be in victim conscious. Like when something really shitty happens, like maybe that's part of the process. Like if you're angry at the world, you're mad at God, you're resentful, I think it's appropriate to have a while of like, fuck you. That's okay, I think. But it's just about
100%
getting out of that. I think we have to actually feel that maybe for a while. Maybe not everyone, maybe those who are truly enlightened never get to the fuck you. But I think for many of us, maybe the process is like, let's go through the fuck you so that we can, and so we understand that just feels terrible and that's not helping us. So then we can get out of it.
100%. And so, the way I look at it is there's a top down and a bottom up kind of process that needs to happen for this kind of healing. So, our nervous system stores trauma, in it. And if we want to get past the trauma of illness, of whatever bad thing happened to us, of an accident, of life that doesn't go according to plan, that traumatic energy needs to be released. And so you absolutely have to let it out and punch your punching ball or your pillows or what have you, and that is one thing. And then there's the top down, which is from my wisest self, from my prefrontal cortex. Can I meet this anger and see the pain that is underneath it, and the vulnerability that says, I feel awful because I don't know what the future holds, and I need to face this uncertainty rather than lash out at others and expect others to kind of find solutions for me. And so once that energy has been released sufficiently, we can do that second part. But if we don't accept the idea that, if we don't understand the difference between blame and responsibility, we remain stuck in that victim mentality, and we remain stuck in that phase where we're leaning into our anger, where we're trying to be legitimized in the fact that we're angry and sad and depressed, and we're stuck. Does that resonate?
Yeah.
So, gosh, where do we even begin? So I guess I want to talk about psychedelics and the nervous system. And I feel like maybe you continuing to tell us about your journey will encapsulate all of that. So maybe you can continue. We'll just continue to interrupt.
Yeah. And, we ended the last kind of exchange at a bit of a down note, but there is a, an upward slope. And so again, when we stop resisting, we can start transforming and choose to grow from our challenges. And so, the way that happened for me was that I started learning about my body, about my nervous system, about what was the process that was happening for me, by really choosing to observe and not freak out every time I had spasms or pain or involuntary movements. I would just stop and observe. And I ended up being extremely lucky in that I was able to travel to Korea to see one of the leading kind of practitioners that help with dystonia. Traveled to Arizona and Toronto and various places where I met with people that are kind of at the cutting edge of understanding this process of maladaptive neuroplasticity, and how the nervous system kind of learns a dysfunctional pattern, and how the anatomy of our occlusion and our upper cervical vertebrae, how all of that gives the messages to the nervous system that end up creating the dysfunction. And so I ended up learning a lot from them, but they weren't taking me to the finishing line. And so I researched a lot, and I hypothesized that since psychedelic mushrooms were shown to be able to promote neuroplasticity, and I knew that dystonia was a form of maladaptive neuroplasticity, I hypothesized that, okay, if I provide functional inputs to my nervous system and combine that with psychedelic mushrooms, I should be able to teach my brain new functional patterns.
Wow.
And
that's a pretty, I mean, I'm already there. I just love this initiative and this like ballsiness and this like, I mean, I love it.
And I also
Thank you.
love, like, going back to what we were just saying about, like, feeling powerless, like, right, because victim stories is very much rooted in our powerlessness, that, like, surrounded by all these academics and these doctors and these leading experts in the whole world, the gorgeousness of being like, I got a fucking theory.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, and I
Yeah.
have sovereignty, and I have my own inherent wisdom, and I just think that's really beautiful. And I just want to witness how incredible that is, to do it within an institution that, intentionally or not, is built on, like, we're the professionals, and and we know, and you're, that's really incredible.
Yeah.
Something interesting about dystonia and about all really functional neurological disorders is that, to Western medicine and kind of the established protocols of Western medicine, the ones that would be applied to you if you went to a neurologist, all of this is like a black box. We just know that there's dysfunction that comes out, but they don't even try to look in there. And so the leading experts in actually trying to rewire the brain are, a doctor of Korean medicine who, measures the height on your teeth to create the appropriate balance in your TMJs. A coach in, who develop techniques to stimulate your cranial nerves and get you to connect to them, creatively, with vinegar and vibration and all kinds of things like that. And someone else with a patient, actually, who was affected by dystonia, who was able to rewire his brain, and now teaches others how to recover. So it's really the things that work for dystonia and for neurophysiological disorders are in a completely different domain compared to Western medicine. And it's fascinating because Western medicine, for all its incredible merits, it takes that agency away from you. It does not envision the possibility that you, being in your own body, can connect to your nervous system differently and inhabit your body differently and use your body differently, even when there's talk of physical therapy and so on. It's just not it.
Okay.
And so
wait, this is like, I love this. There's something really beautiful about this. Well, actually, there's something really frustrating. Let's start there, which is like, the medical system. It's like, God damn it. Seriously, it's one of the things that infuriates me the most. Like, as having two parents who are like not in great health. It's I can't even go there. It's just the worst. It's the absolute fucking worst. And then, but I think what's interesting to me about this is like, so there's this something really empowering and beautiful about discovering for yourself and being able to trust yourself and have this autonomy. Where my mind goes, because I often go into devil's advocate mode, is like, but there's a slippery slope here too, because this is like what the vaccine is all about, and where people are like, you can't trust doctors, and you have to like, and like or like, I don't know. I think about Steve Jobs all the time when he had cancer and he like wouldn't get treatment and he just drank a bunch of carrot juice. Like, I read his biography because he was really on that holistic tip, and I've seen that too, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's like I do think what you're pointing out though is that you tried all the Western stuff. So you were like, open to being supported through Western medicine. It wasn't until it didn't work that then you had to like turn to other measures. But I just think, it's confusing, I guess, and it's complicated.
Yeah. And, I think one way to think about this is kind of the way you would go about healing your trauma and your wounds with meditation and psychedelics and, you know, going within kind of on your own or with the support of a teacher or, you know, a guide or what have you, but kind of doing the work for yourself versus going and getting medication from a psychiatrist. There's a time and place for that. There's, you know, that can be wonderful support, but it's just a different way of looking at the problem and a different solution that we're looking for. And so,
and also,
yeah.
sorry, just to jump in there,
Yeah.
like in my own journey, it was combining, like it was my postpartum experience involved like some dredging up some pretty ancient trauma, and it was medication that took the edge off enough that it
Yeah.
was safe for me to
Mhm.
do the metaphysical energy work,
Yes.
right? Like I was in too heightened a state to actually even do some of the more holistic approach, and it was the
Exactly.
combination that got me to this really beautiful place.
Exactly.
And so that I think is also really, you know, it doesn't need to be either or, even
Exactly.
though maybe different people might position it as an either or. We actually get access to something maybe bigger than that.
For sure. And what you're describing is maintaining your sense of agency and, you know, saying, okay, these are the tools that are available to me, including medication, and I'm gonna, you know, take advantage of this so that I can, you know, do the work that that I know needs to be done, versus being in a mentality where, you know, you try to forget about that ancient trauma, and they're just trying to, you know, as you were saying, power through whatever difficulty there is, and, you know, maintain tunnel vision, and
manage the symptoms of like, well, this is my limited experience and I'm just going to try to keep treading water, as opposed to believing, what if I could fucking swim?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
where did we leave off? I don't even remember.
So next stop in the journey.
Yeah. So I love, by the way, you know, this opportunity to share my journey, because so many people are affected by these functional neurological disorders, excuse me, and don't really have any hope, and really don't know that this is a possibility, that they can own their own body and own their nervous systems, and create change. So yeah, the next stop in the journey really is that I started developing a method. So I started, you know, using some of the techniques that I had learned to map out my nervous system and seeing what is hypertonic, what is getting too much electricity, what is being overused, and what is hypotonic, what is getting too little electricity, what is being avoided. And can I stimulate gently what is hypotonic, what is being forgotten and underused, so that I even out the distribution of that electricity? And can I get my brain to learn a functional pattern that includes both sides of my body symmetrically? Mm. And obviously, you start by thinking about the physical stuff. So can I, you know, smell essential oils to the same degree with my left and right nostril? You know, can I taste vinegar to the same degree on my tongue, left and right? But it gets much more profound and complicated than that, because obviously the quote unquote psychological traumas are layered on top of the physical trauma, right? So in my case, I often didn't feel safe, you know, speaking up for myself growing up, or, you know, expressing my needs and so on. And so this open bite on the left, I ended up stabilizing it by biting my tongue on the left and kind of allowing that side of the tongue to really just become a piece of meat. And and with that came a series of compensations whereby I was always kind of slouching in this kind of defensive posture. And so as I undid all of that, all of the developmental trauma and all of that all came up, and I had to begin rewiring that stuff as well. And so kind of in a similar way, finding what is missing, what are the messages that I didn't get growing up, and what are the things that I am believing right now that are limiting me, and can I provide what's missing and try to include that stuff in a new pattern, in a new way of being in my body, in a new way of being me, that is more complete, that is more whole. And so that process is really what allowed me to get my life back, and find a sense of purpose that really gives me so much joy, in being able to help other people go about this journey.
Yeah. Okay, wait, so many questions. Okay, wait, so
I love it.
So, I mean, I think this is what you're saying, but I think I intentionally want to maybe acknowledge this. What you're essentially saying is that, I mean, I guess we already know this, but I think it's just so cool that, is it safe to say that once you dealt with the trauma, the psychological shit, that there was a direct positive impact on then your physicality?
100%. This is one of those things that, if you say it to a neurologist or what have you, they would laugh you out of the office. And, I've been laughed out of the office many times when I still didn't know what was going on. Doctors would literally take my hand and kind of laugh and walk me out. But one of the things that sounds absurd but are so true is that I had an overused right side of the body, which at the level of the cortex connects to the left brain, right? So the rational, analytical part of the brain that wants to control and figure things out and kind of live in that control-oriented mode, right? And that rational kind of mode. And the first time I did mushrooms, after stimulating my hypotonic, forgotten left side of my body, it's as if the right side of my brain that had been trying to kind of come online and be included in the person I was, all of a sudden it could shine, and I could have a direct experience of the world without the need to understand or control or subjugate or
intellectualize.
Intellectualize, exactly. Yeah. And that was a transformational experience, and that ability to be with things in that different way, it manifested literally in a way to kind of use my eyes differently, to smell things differently, to all of that. And so, yeah, when we say that body and mind and spirit are not separate, that is the understatement of the century. They are one. And really, if you look for the separation, you're never going to find it. Mm-hmm. And so, the way to healing is, it has to include all of these aspects kind of all at once. Yeah.
Everything you're saying is so beautiful. And I think I'm receiving a lot of medicine I also need. And, I'm just thinking about how, like, we know that stress makes it more likely, like if you have a heart condition and you're stressed, we're worried you're going to have a heart attack, right? There's ways in which we very consciously acknowledge, like, you were overworking yourself for 2 weeks and you got a cold. Like, that's totally normal. We totally accept that. And yet somehow we think that trauma doesn't affect our physical health. Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense, right?
Yeah.
If 2 weeks of overworking can give you a cold, of course and we know trauma lives in our nervous system and our body, like it's illogical to assume that there's not some psychological component. And going back to the theme I think we were talking about in the beginning is like, I think some of the reasons why that gets dismissed is because it can get used or look like victim blaming, right? Which is like, oh, like you're just sick because, you know, because of your depression or whatever. And so you're so shake it off, right? But of course that's not what's actually happening or what works or what you're saying.
But you're totally right. And that's where, you know, that piece about safety comes in. Can I feel safe and supported enough to look at these patterns that are making me sick without feeling, you know, the crushing weight of judgment or what have you, and then understand, make that switch from blame to responsibility and empowerment. So it's not my fault, but now that I know this, I can make changes. And, you know, I don't know if you guys have heard of Gabor Mate. He's this Canadian doctor that is really a pioneer in, you know, trauma treatment, and he uses psychedelics. He got in trouble for it, but he's the leader, you know, in the field now. And he wrote a book called When the Body Says No. And I haven't read all of it yet, but the little bit that I read really resonates so much. And it's full of stories of people whose bodies ended up saying no for them, ended up creating boundaries that they weren't able, they didn't feel safe creating for themselves. And so I see it in my own life so many times when I kind of put myself in a situation where I know I'm not managing my boundaries well, I get sick. And then what happens is that, oh, well, I have to stay in bed because, you know, I can't function. And that's my body saying no instead of me. So is it my fault? No, it's the way my psychoneuroimmunology tries to protect me. But now that I know that this is happening, I can try to grow from this and create better boundaries and not put myself in situations where, you know, I'm putting other people's needs in front of my own and kind of find myself cornered and powerless. And then the only way that I can, you know, avoid suffering is getting sick. So
that's so interesting. The only way I can avoid suffering is getting sick. Like that's how it happens. Like that's our protective response. And I think, I mean, I can relate to this too, because I've talked on the podcast before, I have like chronic fatigue, and that's actually gotten better recently because of some psychological work that I've done. But it's like, that's really like my body saying no because of some partially still unconscious, I'm sure, thing that hasn't been resolved. So it's like, I feel like this really resonates with me. Like I understand this firsthand.
I love that.
I'm also thinking, I'm also just very briefly thinking about like what I'm hearing you say too is like this deep compassion for the body, right? So the body gets sick and recognize like, oh, you're not dumb and broken, right? Which is, I think, often our go-to story, but like you are actively trying to protect me in ways that my mind maybe is not capable of or is making the choices around. And so wow, thank you, body. And also, let's all get together and make a different choice.
100%. And you know, it goes back to, you know, the left brain, right brain kind of way of relating to the body, because it turns out that the left brain sees the body as something you have, whereas the right brain sees it as the body you are. And it turns out
hold on. Sorry. I think that just like blew both Kylie and I's minds.
Yeah. Can you just say that again so we can sit in that?
Yeah. So apparently the left brain sees the body as, you know, the body you have. I sit here up here in my head, and I have this thing that I manage. And then the right brain sees the body as the body that you are. And turns out that in German, there are two different words for the body that you have and the body that you are. If I'm not mistaken, it's Körper and Leben. And so, to your point, Kylie, if we try to repress the body that we have because we have a story about what we're supposed to be doing, and we want to power through, we forget that the body that we are is really telling us about what is happening within us emotionally, spiritually, at every level. And so, the gift of mindfulness is that we can go back to the body that we are, and we can start tapping into that wisdom, and understanding really at a direct and profound level what is true for us beyond all the stories that we might be constructing with our left brain to kind of rationalize and control and make ourselves look good or what have you, right?
I'm like tearing up, and like you literally just made me cry.
I'm having a very profound experience
I'm
over
so
here.
happy to connect with you guys. This fills me with joy.
Yeah. When you said that like mindfulness is, I don't even know, I'm going to botch it, but something along the lines of mindfulness is the opportunity to directly experience the body that you are. I felt that in my bones, because I think that's exactly like you gave me words for something that I didn't. That's it. That's what the practice is. Like you're just completely with yourself and in yourself and of yourself. And it's such a simple yet profound experience that I think so many of us are deprived of, and that makes me sad, because it's it, like, that's it.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
As you were saying that, I mean, I really I closed my eyes, and like felt teared up. That was really profound. And I felt, I don't know how to describe it, I felt my body greeting me as a friend.
That's
maybe
so
for the
beautiful.
first time that I've witnessed that, like my body being like, hi pal, yeah, we love you.
Yeah. Which is huge, because how many of us go around hating our bodies? Like, whether it's, I mean, we could just, there's, weight, aging, and illness is a part of life, right? Like it's one of the ultimate truths, and death, right? So
yeah.
And even
Okay.
even like the timing of this is so exquisite, and I'm so grateful for, because I have been moving through a lot of body story in this actual week in particular. But one of the things I've recognized is this real resentment to the body, because I have these kind of beautiful mystical experiences, right? Like I go into meditation or kind of a trance experience, and I'm like somewhere else, big air quotes, right? And even though it's a very felt experience, I have been reading that as and that then I come back to the body, and I am frustrated by its limits and by its limitations and by its material needs, and as if I could escape the body, I could experience infiniteness, as opposed to the portal to the infinite is so fucking clearly here, which is also something that I didn't voice it at the time, but I received in the very beginning when you guys were talking about the way that what is in the way is the way. And I instantly was like, yeah, the body is the portal to the infinite. So thank you again for just bringing me back to this place.
Yes, I love what you just said. And, the body is the portal to the infinite. I have another saying that I think is mine, but maybe I read it somewhere. But it's one of kind of the things I live by, which is the mundane is the gateway to the essential. And so there's something kind of Zen or Taoist about it. And I know you're in Taiwan, Eva, which, I think embodies a lot of this mentality in a lot of ways. But the the daily stuff, the small stuff, the cleaning your apartment,
or even meditation. Let's take that as like the most basic. It's literally focused on breathing. Like it is the most simple, and also can be a portal to the most profound.
Exactly. And it really starts from there. This is kind of what we have in order to experience the infinite. And I know you guys used to ask the question at the beginning of an episode of what is spirituality, and to me it's exactly kind of doing that kind of bridging that you were describing, Kylie, of there's that ultimate reality, there's that infinite, there's that that reality that isn't limited by categories and so on, where we're interconnected, where compassion is infinite and accessible. And how do you bridge that with daily life? How do you live from that? And I think the practice of spirituality to me is really, again, going back to the mundane, to the small stuff, to the breathing, to the what have you, and finding that connection, and making choices that reflect that connection.
Okay, so I'm like, I feel like we could go on forever. So I want to make sure that we ask the questions that I selfishly really want to get to before we
get into the mushrooms now.
Yes.
I love it.
Exactly. Yes. Like, can you just tell us about that? I guess my questions that come to mind are like, was it self-facilitated? Like how often? Like, and I don't even really know what my questions are. Kylie, do you have specific questions about it?
I'm just curious to hear what your journey was and has been, and how the mushroomies have created a new experience.
So first of all, disclaimer: don't do anything that is illegal where you live. The laws are changing very fast, but check before you do anything like this, and find yourself a knowledgeable medical professional and see if this is right for you, if you're interested. So nothing that we're saying, is an encouragement to do anything imprudent. But that being said, my experience was self-facilitated, and it included both microdoses and macro doses. So anywhere from like 0.1 grams of mushrooms to 4 grams. That's kind of the most that
4 grams is a lot, isn't it? That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And so I really wanted to experience kind of a spectrum of different, possibilities. And, there are different ways to work with this. One is going about that work I was describing, of finding out what's missing in your patterns, both, quote unquote, psychological patterns and physical patterns, trying to include that and practice a new pattern that makes use of this. And then you can microdose, a few times a week, and help your brain create the change that you're looking for.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Like, in your practice, would you like kind of set an intention? Like, okay, you observe a pattern, you recognize like, oh, I didn't feel comfortable speaking up, and I can see the way that's showing up here. Now I'm going to, microdose or whatnot, and my intention is to move through that. Or would it be less overt than that?
Yeah. It sounds like you had like kind of an intentional plan. And I guess I'm kind of like, how did you come up with that?
So, some of it is, the wisdom that's been passed down for generations that, nowadays is summarized in ideas about setting, sitter for some people. So, the mindset that you bring to the experience, the setting that's around you, and so on. There's lots of resources online that kind of describe that kind of standard wisdom. But I find that one really useful way of looking at this is, what I was describing earlier, seeing really what is missing. Can I give it to myself? And really, to the brain, there isn't a big difference between, the actual experience and, something that you conjure up and kind of give yourself, to your inner child, for example. So, I grew up in a home where sometimes there was a lot of anger or a lot of big emotions around things that I would say or share, or needs that I would express, and it's evolved in my adult life as a fear of putting myself out there in some ways. And so sometimes I talk to my inner child using figures that I know can provide the kind of message that I didn't get growing up. And so it could be a spiritual figure, it could be, the universe, it could be, your dog, it could be whoever you want. I think I shared this in one of our meetings, Eva, in our training course, but there's this character of a father in a movie called Call Me by Your Name, that shares a beautiful monologue with his child, and really embodies that kind of supportive father that says, I'm there for you no matter what. And so, to me, that's a really effective kind of figure. And so you can kind of build the scenario, you can really kind of create the way to give yourself what you're missing that you want. And one additional thing that I'll share is there's another framework that is really helpful for this, which is RAIN, recognizing, allowing, investigating, and nurturing. And so really that nurturing part is where everything I was describing comes in. So how can I give myself the love and compassion that I didn't get? And then there's another step after the RAIN, which is kind of a bit different from what, say, Tara Brach talks about. To me, if you're trying to rewire something, then the next step is like, okay, now that I received this message, what would my life look like if I actually integrated this into the way I behave, into the way I move in the world, or I inhabit my body? Does that resonate?
Yes. Okay. Yes. And also so many questions. So I'm just going to dive right in because I'm just like so eager.
Yes.
I guess I'm curious, what's the difference between doing this on psychedelics and not? I mean, like, this is, I think, something that we can all practice even without psychedelics, but I guess I'm wondering if the psychedelics played a major role that was different from normal.
Well, the psychedelics, one way to think about what they do, okay, there's neuroplasticity, but one way in which this neuroplasticity manifests is the ski mountain metaphor, which you might have encountered before, but for those who haven't, imagine that the brain is like a snow-covered mountain, and your thoughts, your habits, your behaviors, your movements, everything about you is represented by skiers that go down the slopes. And so the more a skier goes down a certain,
ski path,
certain slope, a certain path, the deeper the grooves become. And so the next skier has a hard time escaping those very deep grooves because the skis just get stuck into the, that automatic pattern. And so what the psychedelics do, one of the things they do is they bring fresh snow. And so those grooves are less deep, and you have a chance to do things differently that maybe would not have been so accessible before. And so there's that happening. So, the terrain is more level. So you have an opportunity to choose differently. But also your brain communicates a lot more. And so you get funny phenomena like, synesthesia, where you can smell colors, or like, hear smells, or what have you. But in addition to the funny stuff, there's the fact that things that were below the line of conscious awareness are able to come up. And then you're able to really understand what's going on for you. And if you've tried to repress and look away from something, it has a chance to emerge. And that's, where the chance for a bad trip could present itself. If you're trying to resist and say, no, I don't want to look at that. That's not what I want to do. Or, if you come into this with the wrong mindset, you could amplify it. But so, yeah, the psychedelics allow for a kind of change that would still be possible, without the psychedelics, but maybe would take longer, or maybe would just be more difficult in terms of that neuroplasticity.
Yeah. Or maybe just not possible at all. It's really hard to choose a different path in the beginning when we're still in that negative headspace, or then it just feels like that path is like we're lying to ourselves because we don't even believe it, right? It's like we're trying to toxic positivity ourselves into a new path, and that actually backfires.
Yeah. I really, really loved what you said about, rain, and then what would it look like if I fully embody this new pattern, what does that look like? I just think that's so incredible. And when you talked about psychedelics kind of offering you snow, I came back to that. It's this idea of like, we get to choose, and also we are responsible for choosing, right? So we can do the journeys, have these mystical experiences, these profound shifts, and then we still choose, right? And we could choose to go down the same old grooves and rewire them. And also we can be compassionate about that if we do make that choice. But I really love this idea of like, I guess like this play between surrender and choice, and surrender and choice as a means to creating a new wiring and experience.
Yeah. And you what you're describing is kind of where the ability to rest in consciousness is really key. And where kind of the practice of meditation and so on really makes a difference, especially when combined with psychedelics, in my experience, because you're able to see your mind, your thoughts, your patterns, and your body as this phenomenon that you're observing, right? And so you can choose to really observe a different phenomenon, and to really say, okay, if what I'm trying to produce is this other pattern, this other state, can I start from this place of consciousness where I'm not bound by, the self as I inhabit it on a daily basis? And can I tap into this kind of ocean of compassion and presence that becomes available in these states? And that's where the spiritual path really is essential in giving us the power to create the profound change.
What's interesting to me about this is that I'm having a reaction, because what you're saying, I think, is so real and profound. And it also actually reminds me a lot of what we see in like the pop spirituality world, which I sometimes can be cynical and negative about, where it's like, you need to like imagine it. And then like, this is like the secret. The secret is literally imagine it.
Yeah.
And then like feel it in your body, and then like see what your life would be like, and I guess I'm just having a dissonant moment of like, I am with you, Federico. Like I am on board with all of this, makes so much sense. And but I guess I'm just wondering, like, is there a difference Or is it
Yeah.
really?
Can
Yes, please. Either
can
of
I
you.
speak to
Yeah.
that what I'm observing you, and then which is the difference, I think, feels like the witnessing of the patterns and the resistance and the pain and what we might call trauma beforehand. Like if you try to skip over that kind of
Right.
shadowy part and go
That's the
straight
bypass,
to
spiritual
like
bypassing.
then
Yeah.
like that's when we're just like la la la, I'm pretending I'm on a different path, but I'm on the exact same path.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm hearing and what you're saying, and it feels like my felt experience too.
Yeah.
100%. And the pop spirituality version of this is, I want to manifest a Ferrari, and I want to manifest, lots of money, and I want to manifest, a tall, handsome boyfriend, and what have you. We're manifesting it's manifesting from the ego, from a place of like smallness, and I'm sure that if you keep thinking about red Ferraris, you're gonna notice all the red Ferraris around you, and start gravitating towards the people that own the red Ferraris, and I don't know, maybe bring yourself to a state where maybe you're more likely to get yourself one. But that's kind of not what I'm talking about. What I think is the real kind of powerful way of rewiring is manifesting from a wider, vaster place, that is not limited by this constant kind of thirst, and aversion, like attachment and aversion, manifesting from a place that says, okay, I know that love and compassion are available. If I really step back from all my patterns and my stories and rest in awareness, I can tap into a source of love and compassion that is inherent within me. And that compassion I can bring to the parts of me that are suffering. And then I can embody that. And I can really create the neural pathways that that are missing by feeling it in my body, by imagining what my life would be like, by imagining what my body would feel like. And so you're tapping into something, into that ultimate reality that we were talking about. And so that to me makes all the difference. And it isn't really something that out there and esoteric. I don't know, at least to me, if you think about it, this is how every kind of learning happens, right? We have to try something new and practice it. And so now we're just trying something new and practicing it, but we're looking deeper and deeper for that thing that that we want to include in what we're practicing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really also love what you said about creating from a place of smallness, right? Or like manifesting from a place of smallness, because I think like the Ferrari is irrelevant, right? Like I'm a business coach. The money is irrelevant, right? Like it's not, it is always intention, right? And so when we are creating from a place of smallness, we give ourselves more experiences of smallness, regardless of whatever like material thing we've created, right? Because that's kind of the place from which we were creating. So, right, like when we're creating a Ferrari because we won't think it'll make us feel cool, and then we get the Ferrari and then we still don't feel cool because the creation was born out of smallness, right? And so I think that like really gorgeousness of the pattern recognition and the witnessing and the compassion and all of these things that you're speaking to is that it creates the space so that we're creating from spaciousness. We're creating from like infinite expansive love, and then what we create can actually nourish us.
And creating from infinite, expansive love, um, and from a place of wholeness as well.
Yeah.
Realizing that we're already whole, we're
Yeah.
already, you know, good. We're good.
Mhm.
Deep down, that gold, shines within us, and we just have to come home to it. And
Yeah.
when we get there and we start, allowing that to help us create the reality we want, um, then, we're not chasing things, we're not chasing abundance. We can, align our lives in ways that ultimately, uh, produce the kind of um,
Mhm.
the kind of safety and abundance and what have you that we are looking for, and we end up fulfilling our needs not out of a place of fear, but out of a place of coherence.
Mm. Oh, so beautiful.
I'm so happy that resonates.
I'm actually curious then. So when did meditation come in? And was this all happening sort of simultaneously? Like, how does meditation
Yeah.
feed into your healing process? And obviously it had a profound effect because now you're training to be a teacher.
Yes. Yeah. So it all started with yoga when I was, dealing with the early kind of symptoms of my neurological issues, and I used to practice Ashtanga Yoga, which is kind of a very rigorous, very tough um, kind of practice where you're really practicing in silence by yourself in a room full of people practicing by themselves.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of silence and there's a lot of focused attention because the postures can be so challenging. And there's a lot of letting go because if you try to force yourself through a posture, usually you don't get it. You're not able to get where you want. And so it teaches you surrender, it teaches you to focus and so on. And one day I was lying down in Shavasana, and I remember feeling this sense of connection to the universe, to everyone, to animals, to uh, the people in the room, and way beyond. And it was a very surprising experience because I was in it just for the physical benefits at the time. And that opened my eyes to a vaster reality. And it made me curious about meditation. And so I started practicing a little bit, but it was always hard for me to practice the way uh, everyone is taught normally, sitting down and breathing, because both of those things were very triggering. And so, my breath was very uneven, and it would um, trigger spasms if I focused on it, and sitting down was impossible. So I ended up developing ways to meditate that um, didn't involve those two things, and so I ended up including that in everyday activities, cooking, and I ended up being really fascinated by the Buddhist monks cuisine of East Asia that really embodies this um, what in Taiwan I've heard people call Fuoxin, like
Mhm.
Buddha heart,
Mhm.
of that full attention and full presence with what you're doing. And so I tried to cultivate that as I could, but really the months that I spent in bed, uh, forced to just be with the pain, those were like a forced meditation retreat, if you will, because I couldn't speak, I couldn't move, I couldn't even watch a movie often because my eyes would trigger spasms.
Mm.
And so that ended up being um, something that helped me evolve in my ability to kind of to practice um, meditation. And as my health improved, I was able to move towards the more classical ways of practicing. And it is very clear to me that this is something that the world needs more of. And it is very clear to me that if there is a purpose to, to why I'm here, part of it is help others kind of awaken to that reality of interconnectedness. And it's part of the reason why, I'm in this beautiful course with you, with you, Eva, to be to become a meditation teacher.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's really, yeah, because I was always wondering like kind of what the connection was, and just that for me, I really do feel like meditation helps with my nervous system. Like it literally, it feels like it literally rewires. Well, I guess it's rewiring my brain, but it also rewires my nervous system, as in how I like less reactionary, right? Like the nervous system is something might be like, like I need to get mad, or even my body might be more jumpy. And so I've been able to, when people ask me like, what's one way to help nourish the nervous system? And I'm like, well, obviously work within your capacity of your window of capacity and what's comfortable for you. But I think, like meditation is a really wonderful pathway to that.
Can I actually ask you a question on that note? If you could speak to some of these like perhaps more non-traditional ways, like when you're talking about like meditating through cooking, because I had an experience. My daughter was young. I don't remember. Some kid was young. And I had signed up for this mindfulness. It was actually not nearly as extensive as a program that you guys are going through, but it was like a mindfulness program. It was like an add-on to a yoga teacher. I don't remember the specifics, but I thought, oh, this will be lovely. And it was tremendously uncomfortable for me. It was really triggering. It led me to learn more about how like sometimes like there's a really beautiful book I think called like Trauma Informed Mindfulness. I can't remember the exact name, but it led me to consider like maybe just sitting still and being quiet is not actually helpful for me in this moment. I mean, there's another way to practice mindfulness. And I'm curious if you could speak. And so I think that's more common than people recognize. And so they think, well, there's only one way to meditate and I'm quote unquote bad at that, or it makes me feel worse. And so I don't do any of it.
Right.
And
or they're like, so it's triggering, like they're triggered through the actual act of being able to, of like, which is understandable, especially if you have trauma, right? Like if you have trauma, having to sit still with yourself is like, maybe like the last thing that you need in that moment. And I think I think you're making a really good point, Kylie. And then people are like, oh, I can't do this, so meditation isn't for me. Or like there's something wrong with me, or some negative story is then formed.
And it was confusing for me because like I previously I met because she was actually my coach in a meditation program, and so I had done like seated based meditation, but it was body scans, because going back to this theme of like, I don't really know if I want to be in this body. So the body scan work was like really profoundly triggering, but in a way I wasn't expecting and didn't understand, and ultimately is helpful in the long run. But I'm wondering if you could actually speak to someone who's listening. What are some other ways, if more traditional methods haven't been accessible to them, that they might bring mindfulness in?
So, one of the things that are really important if you're dealing with trauma is resourcing. And so, there's a step before the mindfulness practice and the meditation practice. And it can be, it can take different forms for different people. But basically, you want to be in a place where you feel safe and grounded enough that you can deal with something difficult if it comes up. And so it might be, having the support of a teacher or a psychotherapist or what have you. It can also be, speaking to what you were describing, Eva, of your brainstem, this part of your brain behind the head that, just reads the world in terms of neuroceptive cues. Is there a cue of safety or lack of safety? And so resourcing can take the form of, in my case, sprinkling around your apartment safety cues, things that remind you that you're safe and you belong and there are no threats. And so, we ended up having a very difficult experience with US immigration. Long story, but we had everything that we needed, and then
You mean
Trump
you and
administration.
your partner?
Yeah, me and
Yeah.
my husband.
Mhm.
And and then the Trump administration, came up with these rules that green cards had to be slashed in half no matter what. And so they started basically issuing denials regardless of whether you actually fulfilled the criteria or not. And so that was really traumatic for me, because I had built, kind of this safe place for us in New York City. And so for me, resourcing, so that I was able to do some of that meditating, took the form of putting the Canadian flag, I live in Canada now, as a screensaver on my phone, and then a little flag on the fridge, and then a little flag somewhere else saying, okay, now you're safe. The rules matter here. And nobody's gonna, send you letters threatening to deport you or what have you. And so it's important not to jump into meditation when you feel like you don't have that grounding. And there are many techniques that that one can use to get to that place. But once you are in that state, that you feel, okay, I can allow things to come up, it's wise to choose the kind of anchor that isn't triggering. So if the breath is triggering because your nervous system isn't balanced, and so it creates spasms for you to breathe one-sided, say, or what have you, then my anchor was, for example, washing rice. So I would really feel everything that was going on with the rice under the water, the temperature of the water, the consistency of the rice, the shape of the grains, and feeling the rice on my left hand and then on my right hand, and the color of the water that changed. And it sounds trivial, but keeping your attention focused on anything for a while, when you're not used to it, is hard. That's why meditation is hard, and it's hard no matter what the anchor is. And so, but any anchor, I think, can be helpful, and kind of that's how I would go about it.
Yeah. I'm going to add some things as well, which I have to say are things that I've learned as a result of this course, which I'm so happy about, because these are such important questions, Kylie. But
Yeah.
I think so. This idea of resourcing is interesting because they gave some really great examples. And one of them was sharing a story about this woman who had gone through sexual abuse. And so she wasn't safe in her body and wasn't safe like being by herself. And for her, anchoring was literally imagining her and her sisters, like as she was meditating, when she started to feel that freak out moment, she'd be like, okay, wait, what are my resources here? And it's like my sisters, and we're all sitting in a room and we're laughing, and I'm having like this happy memory. And so for you, because I know you, I think you have a plethora of like resources. I mean, you can call on your archetypes, Loki, like whoever your people are. And if you were to do a body scan, something that can help anchor you in being safe. But kind of like what Federico was saying, like even maybe a body scan may not be the place to start until you start to feel a little bit more resourced and comfortable. And then you can do the body scan within your window of tolerance. So it may not be 10 minutes, it might be 30 seconds. And like moving from there, like literally starting from a minute is how I started meditating, because I couldn't meditate for a minute. Like I was so anxious. I freaked the fuck out, and I would just get up and just, I couldn't do it anymore. And I didn't have a judgment or a story about myself. And that's how I built on it.
I love, yeah. And for the record, I don't know that the body scan is probably still not my most favorite, but they're not, as complicated as they once were. But I love what you're saying about a window of tolerance, because I know one of the things that happened to me in that moment was that I was like, well, the assignment is a 20-minute body scan and I lasted 30 seconds and I fucking hate this.
Yeah.
And so this failure story showed up. So I really love, which serves nobody, right? And so I really love this point of like, who fucking cares? Like, what is the window of time in which like it's accessible to you? And I love I love your example about the rice. Like I felt like I was there with you, and you know, I'm talking about, what am I trying to say? If part of like my resistance was also showing up in the body, right? Different experiences and same experiences, right? And so what you're describing is making me like want to go wash some rice as a means of like getting into the body, as someone whose journey is to like keep trying to hop out of the body. So you mentioned, you're like, oh, it seems trivial, but actually it seems so profound, to your point of like the mundane is the profound
Gateway to the essential. Yeah.
Yes. So I love that. And what's funny, forgetting for a moment that so much of your journey is about psychedelics, I was like, I instantly came back to this moment where, this is an earlier podcast episode, but I essentially had a drug-free mushroom trip. It was
the whole
lovely mystic.
Yeah, whole conversation there.
Yeah, we'll sidebar about that another time. But it was this beautiful mystical experience. And as you were describing this slowdown of washing the rice, I was remembering like holding this plastic water jug and just being like, holy shit, plastic, right? And like really just so enamored by these teeny tiny details, and how much we don't have access to that in our busyness. So thank you for those examples. That feels really, those both feel really nourishing to me. So thank you. I asked for the audience, but you gave me exactly what I wanted.
Thank you guys so much for these conversations are so helpful, and I know we're not the only ones who need this information and who need to hear this stuff. So one last thing that I think is helpful for those who are listening is pendulating. So you don't have to focus, even when you begin to work with the things that are difficult. You can go back and forth with your focus between, say, the body scan and the image of you with your friends on a beach, whatever the idea of resourcing is for you, and build that capacity. So I thought that was important to mention as well.
Yeah. There's just like there's real softness there, rather than the pass fail structure that some of us Hermione's 100%. Over here can apply.
I just think it's interesting. It's like this really brings to light the fact that meditation is not, there's literally 1,000 different ways to meditate, and being with rice and being present and focusing your attention on your rice is meditation. Titrating between two different things you may not think of as meditation, because sometimes people think it's like, oh, it means sitting for 20 minutes without thinking about anything else. But first of all, that's not possible. And also, I think there's so many avenues. Walking meditation, like people feel like they're in a meditative state when they're running, because they're so focused on their breath. And I think it's helpful just to make sure that to spread the message that it's very different, so that it can be more accessible to people rather than feeling like it has to be one way.
100%. Yeah.
All right. I'm I do have any other questions, Kylie? I feel like I want to be mindful of like not diving into a whole nother thing that would lead to another hour of conversation.
I know. This is like, I can't really put into words how much everything that we've said has been exactly what I needed to hear. So I'm super, super grateful.
Yeah.
I'm so happy and grateful as well. It's wonderful to connect with, such like-hearted, like-minded people with such where we connect so well. It's really, this is the kind of nourishment for the soul that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Should we move on to joy? Yeah. All right. Do you want to ask the question, Kylie?
Yeah, Federico, what is something that's bringing you joy right now?
Yeah, so it's the small stuff, like sitting down for tea, And having that as the anchor, and smelling the delicious floral, fruity notes, and like Thich Nhat Hanh said, drinking your cup of tea as if it was the axis the world revolves around. That was something that I did today, and it really brought an incredible amount of joy, because I know that it is not a given. Being able to just be still, to just be present, to feel that safety and connection. So it's the small stuff like that, small big stuff. And then I had 2 conversations with new clients today, and people who didn't have any hope that they could ever get their lives back. And I don't know if we're actually going to end up working together, but just seeing that glimmer of hope in their eyes means everything to me. So how about you guys? What's something that's bringing you joy?
Do you want to go, Eva?
Yeah, I would love to, because I'm in quarantine right now. I'm almost at the tail end, and a lot of my quarantine has been about, I wanted to put together these playlists just as something that I could share with people, and as like a free thing, be like, because I love music, as Kylie, and it's allowed me to just listen to music. And I cannot tell you, like, literal, it's ecstatic joy. Like, listening to music brings me ecstatic fucking joy. And I listen to music a lot in my regular life, but this is different. This is like, I'm not doing anything else. I'm not like listening to music in the background. I'm just like, oh, and like, I don't know. It's such a geeky thing, but it reminds me of being back in like the early 2000s when MP3s were a thing. And I was really dorky about like organizing all of them into categories and genres. And as a result, I just got to listen to all of this music with full presence. There are no words to describe like the spiritual experience of listening to music. I get like emotional things, like nothing else to me. There's very few things. It's like sex, food, music, like, like music is so up there on my list of like why it feels joyous to be a human. And so I guess it's like a shout out to music, a shout out to these epic playlists I'm making for all of y'all. So if any listeners are like need new music, and I'm making different playlists. One's like a solo dance party music, which is like what I've been dancing to mostly in quarantine. And then also like a list of songs that are so beautiful that they'll make you cry. And one for like a music sleep wind down, because I think it's important to like wind down before you sleep. And I'm really excited to
I have
share
all
that
of these.
Yes, I would love to share them with you. And I have thought like with kids, if people have kids, like the sleep wind down one, I think will be nice. It's just like nice for parents and kids, because sometimes kid music can be like, kid music. So just so excited about
we listen to music that's like part of our like just before like final thing before bed. And so I'm always kind of like looking for new wind down songs.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
I'm excited for
Yay. I'll be happy to share that. And for people who are interested, it'll probably find it on Instagram and it'll be up on my website at some point. Yeah. Cool. All right, Kylie, what about you? What's bringing you joy?
So it's school vacation week. So I brought my kids up to Maine to see my family. My parents live in like kind of like semi-rural Maine. And it's just really lovely. I love seeing my kids. My parents have 2 cats and a dog, and like my brother and his wife live up the street. And I live in the suburbs in Massachusetts, and so they come to Maine, and like they went to visit my uncle, and my uncle's neighbor had baby goats a week ago, and they literally got to feed baby goats with a milk bottle. Like I think my son, like they never want to leave when we come up here. It's just like so magical. And so and my parents, because they live in the middle of nowhere, they have like 30 acres. So we go like traipsing up in the hills, and like, it's just a really, really, really magical, gorgeous place to be. And to be able to like see my kids just like running around being wild is really, really beautiful. And then today my brother came down the hill because he lives right up the street, and he and his wife had bought these two mini bikes. It's just like kind of like a dirt bike. Um and they were come outside, and he's taking each of my kids one at a time up the hills in the backyard on this mini bike. And my kids are like, my daughter, who's gonna be 3 next month, like loves anything with an engine, so she's like having the fucking time of her life. And my son, who's 5, is like, you can hear him like all the way down the hill, just how loud he's laughing. And so watching them was super, super fun. And then my brother's like, there's 2 of them. He's like, come on, Kylie, you ride one. And I was like, okay. And so I rode down the street. He's like, you gotta go on the street, like it's more fun. Who obviously didn't want to take the kids on the street. And so I rode down the street. Oh my God, it was the most fun thing I've ever done in my entire life. I was like laughing so hard. It was just like totally silly, totally joyful. Like it just the greatest. It was just like, I felt like my little kids. Like I got why they were having so much fun. And I was really relished that, just like,
I love that. I could
perfect.
feel
That sounds
ecstatic.
amazing.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
joy of just like being on a bike, whether it's like a motorized bike or like a bike, it's like, oh my God, we like take it for granted. Like this is so free. It's like silly and joyful
Yeah.
and fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it was I was like, do I get a motorcycle now? Is that what happens? This is the best.
Yeah. I think this is probably why people get motorcycles, because they're like, holy
Yeah,
crap, this
yeah.
is so fun. So I could
Tune in
feel
next
that.
week when Kylie has a Harley Davidson.
I could feel the exhilaration, as you were describing it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Makes
for
me
sure.
want to hop on a bike as well.
Yeah, right. I'm glad that I got to share a little of that exuberance. It was really fun. Yeah.
All right. I
Yeah,
guess this is
Federico.
Mhm.
Yeah. Where can people find you if they want to follow along, if they want to work with you? What do you have cooking that you'd want the folks can tune into?
Wonderful. So 2 websites. The first one is hopefordystonia.com. So dystonia is Dystonia. And that's where I share, the work that is focused really on the nervous system and kind of rewiring the nervous system, whether it's dystonia or something similar, another functional neurological disorder. And then I have another website, a newer one. It's my first name, last name.com. So federicopetrelli.com. And FEDERICOPETRELLI.com. And that's the home of mindfulness instruction, psychedelic preparation and integration, and kind of a broader version of mind-body healing, where I help people kind of reflect on what their bodies are trying to convey, kind of along the lines of what we were discussing earlier. And so, yeah, good things are coming, on both fronts. Soon I'm planning on sharing more meditations, more blog posts, more materials. So I look forward to welcoming anyone among the listeners that is interested.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna actually, so both of us are working on this practicum where we're going to be facilitating meditation. So I would even say, like, yeah, people, do you know what your practicum is going to be about yet, Federico?
Well, there's going to be an intro to mindfulness, initial course. And then I think the second piece is going to be something centered around, this mind-body connection that we were talking about. So, helping people tap into that wisdom
Cool.
of the body. So yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, please reach out.
I'm going to send people
on
your way.
either one of the websites.
I'm raising my hand, listeners.
Well, I think
I would love to have you.
And so I'm working on something completely different. So it's like, I think it's cool. I'm working with people, with people in a more Al-Anon setting. So happy to send people your way. But I think what's cool about this is like, I know you're charging a very, very, very reasonable price. We both are. Like, this is accessible to people because it's not going to be an exorbitant amount of money. And got some really qualified people in this course doing shit for like really, I don't know, or almost free basically. So
Yeah.
I think if this resonates with you and Federico's work resonates with you, like you're in really good hands. Yeah.
And same with Eva. You have so much wisdom to share. And Kylie, I haven't known you for as long as I know Eva, but
she has a lot
it
of
was
wisdom to
such
share,
a-
in which she's always helping me out of my own existential shit. So I can vouch for her.
I can feel it. I can feel it, and
Yeah.
it was such a treat to be here with both of you guys.
Awesome.
Thank you. Really,
Thanks,
truly.
Federico.